afternoon of Sunday the 2nd of October, I posted a video on this channel of replacing the soft top on the Lotus Elan at 8 minutes past 3, just 6 minutes later. I was rather surprised to receive a copyright infringement notice from Warner Music Group, because in that video at one point the song Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin is playing in the car radio in the background while we're doing some work on the hood. Now, when you watch this video, you'll hear songs playing on the car radio from a few different artists. It's a long and tedious job replacing the soft top, and you'll want some music on to take your mind off it. But unfortunately, Warner have objected to the use of their song appearing in the video. So, if you've seen the video on replacing the hood already, then you are free to go. This is exactly the same video that you've seen already, just with the offending piece of music edited out so that our viewers in the States can enjoy it too. I just hope that the copyright holders of all the books that are on the shelf behind me don't object to their copyrighted material appearing incidentally in the background of this video, or we'll be back where we started. Now, they say there are always winners and losers, but in this case there are nothing but losers, because our viewers in the States haven't been able to watch a free, not-for-profit educational video on how to replace the soft top on their car. I've had to spend a bit of time and trouble editing the video to remove the music clip, and Warner Music, they lose as well, because I'll make sure that I never buy any music from them again, and that way we can prevent any more of their songs inadvertently appearing in our videos. Okay, Warner, I'm sorry, I apologise. I hereby promise that no Led Zeppelin songs or derivatives thereof will ever appear in our videos again. Today we're replacing the hood on this car. Now, it's a job that neither Helper Kate nor I have ever done before, so this video might not be up to our usual high production standards, you know, that tight script and the sharp camera focus, the perfect lighting that you've come to love and expect from these videos. Instead with this one, we're just going to be busking it. We're just going to make it up as we go along, and then we'll try and sort of slap it all together in the editing so it looked like we knew what we were doing.
So how is that any different from what you normally do?
I'll do the jokes. Good! Well, no, we've got that problem sorted out. Let's get on with the hood. Now, I'm in the fairly unusual situation here that the seals are in reasonably good condition and they're reusable, but the hood itself is scrap. As well as all the sort of usual age-related problems, you know, like fading, stitching's perished, the rear window's opaque. The main problems with this hood are, at some point it's been put away wet and so it's shrunk, so the seals are sticking out like a badly packed kebab here. And then the other one is it's got the usual problem where there's a hole just behind the window glass there where the frame rubs through it. So that hood is scrap. We're going to give that one its P45 and get a new employee. So we've got ourselves this new one from Car Hood Warehouse in the southeast of England. Now, supply only, these are about £400, or they'll fit it for you using your existing seals for about £650, all in, including the hood, but we're going to try and fit it ourselves. We start at the rear edge and notice that this seam runs right along the rail of the frame there, and then if you pull that up, the back of the hood is peened over the frame there, and it's just stuck on with contact adhesive. There's a couple of darts cut in at the corners there, just to sort of, so it will go around the corner. We're just going to start by just peeling that all the way back as far as we can. "22-year-old glue, it's still pretty sticky." A pair of pliers helps get it up. There's another dart in the middle there. And it's just sort of tucked and folded and glued in underneath the deck seal in the corners there. Okay, we've put an old dust sheet on the picnic table there just to protect it from the metal frame. Now we've taken the hood off it. The next thing we need to do is remove this falling pillar seal, because the hood is sandwiched in between it and the metal frame in there. If you just come in here, the falling pillar seal is held on by 2 screws. So if you peel back the falling pillar seal, you see that little indent in there, you can go in there with a Phillips screwdriver, and there's a 5mm panhead screw in there, and if you peel back at the bottom, look, there's another indent down there, so that's where the other one's located. In fact, if you peel back the falling pillar seal, you can just see the screw in there, hopefully. Okay, so we've got those two screws undone, and I've folded the hood back almost all the way down so we can just get the bottom edge of the falling pillar seal there. So we'll pull that out of the way, and then there's just a push fit fir tree fastener in the bottom there. Now you're probably going to destroy it getting it out, so you'll have to get a couple of new ones, one for each side, and then just lever that out. So that's the falling pillar seal removed, so we'll put that in a safe place. And then underneath here, I should say this is a Series 2 hood. Series 1 is a little bit different, but the idea is much the same. So underneath here we've got this little foam trim strip which is stuck over the edge of the hood, and then the hood is contact adhesive to the metal frame behind. So I'm just going to get a sharp razor blade there, and we're just going to go down and gently cut away at the edge of that foam sealing strip and peel it back. And then once we've got it started, we can just peel it back, and you may destroy it getting it off, but it's not a big deal. It's only a bit of foam. Just make a new one. And then the hood is just contact adhesive to the frame, so sorry if my arms are in the way, we'll just pull that off. And then we're going to put the new one back on. That corner is obviously right at the corner at the bottom of the falling pillar there. That's the line for that, and then it's just stuck on underneath the bottom edge of the falling pillar as well. So there we go. So now we've got the falling pillar seals off, we can peel the hood up, and then there's a flap here which is sewn into a seam just above the rear window, and that's pinned over, and that's held in by a plastic trim which runs all the way along the underside of this rail here. So we need to get that plastic trim out so we can get this flap out. And then it's quite hard to remove, but the best way of getting it out is that we found, get a flat bladed screwdriver there and pull this lug outwards so you unclip it, so pull it towards the camera and then just bring it down like that. And then once you've got it started, it's a lot easier. There you go. We'll put that in the burgeoning pile of parts. So now back inside the car, looking at the underside of that rail with that trim removed, you can see the ends of the flap are just turned round and tucked in where that trim used to be, so we can just reach in with a screwdriver and just peel them out. And then we're just stuck on with contact adhesive, so that's the back flap removed, and then the front flap is just the same. And then the hood's just stuck to the outside of that rail with contact adhesive as well, so we can just tear that off all the way along. Right, there we go. Next, and the next thing we need to remove is these tensioning wires which run from the front of the frame, then they run inside the hood, inside that seam, then they go through that frame bar, and then there's a locking clamp on the back end there. We need to undo that lock in order to slide it off to withdraw the tensioning wire. So to get this lock off, we need to undo this little bolt. Now if the experience on the other side is anything to go by, as soon as we touch that with the wrench, it's going to shear in two because it's only a tiny little bolt and it's quite rusty. To give ourselves the best chance of getting it out, you can spin the locking clamp round and unscrew this ferrule out of the frame a little bit, and that'll at least give you a bit of clearance to get a spanner or a socket wrench onto it. And then let's just see if we can get this undone and slide it off the cable. Be very gentle with it, it's very delicate. He shoots, he scores. So I've got the screw out, but the cable is pretty well rusted into the ferrule here, and I think it's so well stuck in there that I'm going to knacker the end of the cable beyond reuse getting this off. Which if we do, it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to cut it off and make a new one, because the cable is just 1.6mm braided steel cable, which is bicycle brake cable. This we can do with a bit of electrical heat shrink, this sleeve here, and then at the front end it's just held on with a pop rivet through a red electrical crimp, electrical eyelets, that sort of thing, which is then just crimped onto the cable and then pop riveted to the frame, so we can easily make a new one. Yeah, and I've struggled with that for a few minutes, and all we've really managed to do is fray the end of the cable and damage the sleeve there, so let's do what we should have done at the start, just snip it off, and we'll make a new one when we put it back on. Now the next thing we need to remove is this header rail seal, because the hood is sandwiched between the frame on the inside there and the header rail seal itself. Now when we're taking this header rail seal off, you're going to need to be really, really careful that we don't do any more damage to it than we have to, because you can't get them anymore, they're unobtainable, so we need to reuse this. Now it's held in by 4 screws, 2 on each side, here and here, so we'll just undo those. That's a Torx headed screw. And then there'll probably be a packing piece in here as well between the frame and the seal carrier, so make sure you collect that and remember where it goes when we put it back on. Okay, so that's the screws undone, and then do the same on the other side, and then collect any packers that are in between the two. And there's a little 5mm nut in there as well, so make sure they don't fall out and you use those. They're probably going to be quite rusty, so you'll be well off replacing them anyway. But that's the right hand edge of the header rail seal free now. And the seal is stuck into the seal carrier all the way along with polyurethane sealant, Sikaflex type sealant. So just get a sharp scalpel, sharp razor blade, and just very carefully just cut that back all the way along. And obviously you're not going to see much of my hand in there, but you get the idea. And then periodically, as you peel the seal back, you'll come across a nut. So undo those with a 7mm socket. And then when you've worked your way all the way along, pulling the seal back and undoing the nuts, then the seal carrier will come away, and then we can peel the hood back off the frame. Just while I'm removing this seal, just a bit of a word about these seals. They're made from a neoprene sponge rubber with this sort of skin on the top. The problem with them is that when the skin gets worn off, it exposes the sponge rubber underneath, and then that literally soaks up rainwater like a sponge. So if they're in usable condition but the skin is a bit damaged, you can just repair it by just doing it carefully with a bit of silicone sealant or a bit of polyurethane sort of tiger seal type sealant. Just smooth that out over the damaged area, and that should get them waterproof again. You do need to look after them really, because you can't buy them individually anymore generally. SJ Sports Cars have started making the intermediate seal above the door glass again, so they're in plentiful supply, but the others you can't buy. The only way you can get the seals is a complete kit of seals and hood canopy complete. The history with the hood is it was made by a company called Tickford, who are a famous old British coach building firm who no longer exist. Tickford went out of business in the early 90s and now a company known as Trim Technology. Trim Technology sold all of their hood and seals to a company called M100 Hoods. So at the moment you can get all the seals complete with a hood canopy for about £1,200 or about £1,700 if they fit it for you. At the time we're making this video though, which is September 2016, there's even a problem of getting the seals that way, complete with the expensive hood canopy, because unfortunately the guy that runs M100 Hoods is quite ill, so they're difficult to get from him. So at the moment really you need to either look after these seals and reuse the ones you've got, or you might just have to wait a while and hopefully this situation will resolve itself and the hoods and seal kits will become available again in the future. But until then, just either put off replacing your hood, or as we're doing here, just be pretty careful and take your seals off so that you can reuse them. This header rail seal really is the only one that's difficult to remove. And there you go. Okay, so that's the seal removed. Now all we've got to do is remove the 6 nuts, 1, 2, 3, and the same on the other side, and then we can take the seal carrier away. So that's the seal carrier removed. says something about how rubbish that hood was, that the car looks better and is actually more waterproof without it on. I like it like this. It's got that Terminator in the bit after the fire with the petrol tanker look about it. Now, we're going to give this hood rails a bit of loving with some black paint on the airbrush because they're looking a bit tatty. Also, if you want to replace your elastics, then you're going to need some 2-inch wide black elastic and some pop rivets, which is all that holds that on. We'll see you in a minute and then we'll refit the new one. I'm not going to say too much about renovating the frame. It's mostly just touching up paint and lubricating hinges, which if you've got this far I'm sure you can figure out for yourself. But a couple of things you might find useful. There was an issue on this hood, I don't know if this is a common thing, but there was an issue on this hood that when you went to close the hood, if you notice this elbow in here, that snaps shut like that. But you notice the one on the other side, that stays bent, as the equivalent one on the far side there is still bent. Then when you went to collapse the hood and you pull back on this, you notice that this one locks out, it won't close. You know, you used to have to sort of manually reach in there and pull it down like that and sort of risk trapping your fingers before you could raise the rear hatch there and fold it away. Now with the hood removed, it's actually really easy to see what's causing that. So we're looking at it now, you're looking sort of through the back window, and if you look here, the stop that it closes against here, that's just an eccentric which is held down by this rusty looking bolt. So if we just undo that, and sort of collapse the arm a bit, and you can rotate the eccentric around so that the arm closes, it doesn't quite lock out so far before it closes. If we just nip that up. Now when the hood locks out, I can now just pull back on the hood frame and it collapses the way it should do. And then, obviously I don't know what state your hood frame's going to be in, but it's fairly substantial pieces of steel, so there's no issues with rust on this one. The only place to look for rust actually is, you see this little flange at the bottom there, the falling pillar seal, that fir tree fastener, the falling pillar seal pushes into. Just have a check for rust in there, because that's quite a thin bit of plate there, and because of where it sits obviously it does tend to sit a little bit wet, so that's the only significant rust on this car. Taking the hood off was easy, took probably less than an hour start to finish. All the time is in the restoration bits, repainting the hood rails and fitting the new elastics and so on. Getting the last bit of the elastic on is a bit of a pain in the ass. Either get an assistant or a clamp to hold the tension out of it while you try and get the rivets through the elastic and into the holes. And then it's just a 3.2mm diameter, 6mm long rivet. The next thing we need to do is stick these tapes back onto the frame rails, and to stick these onto the frame rails and also to stick the hood onto the frame we're going to use contact adhesive. Make sure you get a high temperature contact adhesive. It gets pretty hot under here with the hood up in the summer. I've never fitted a hood to one of these cars before, but I've done a fair bit of interior trim before, headlinings and so on, and the one I'm using today is one I've used in the past which I found to be very good, which is this one, HTA 1000, made by a company called Wayside Adhesives, but really any high temperature contact adhesive will do. Right, important message, kids, do not sniff glue. This stuff is £13 a litre. For that sort of money you can buy decent drugs. To use it, what we're going to do is get the lid off and get yourself a spreader, and it's horrible messy sort of a stuff, but spread yourself a nice even coat, decrease the surface, get all the dust off the surface first, get it all nice and clean, spread yourself a nice even thin coat all the way along both surfaces. We're going to spread it onto the rail, and we're also going to spread it onto the tape itself, and then just leave that for 5 minutes to dry until it's touch dry, until it's not tacky anymore. And you've got one shot of this, so don't screw up. Just press it firmly into place and squeeze all the air bubbles and wrinkles out of it as you go. Getting the old Sikaflex out of the channels is a right bore. Get some decent music on. The way we've found best to do it is just lift the edge of the screwdriver and then get on the back edge there and then just rub the screwdriver along, so you're sort of cutting it as you go, and that slices it off and you can get it all off quite cleanly. And because we had to cut the old ones off, the last thing then is to remake a couple of new tensioning wires. So just drill out the pop rivet that holds the old one on. And then to make the new one, this is just bicycle brake cable, so I'm going to cut myself a length of that, slightly longer than I need. We'll trim it down to the right length at the end when we're finished. Then this is just a red electrical crimp-on eyeless, and we're just going to crimp that to the end of the cable with a pair of crimping pliers. There you go, that's never coming off. And this sleeve on the original I can make with electrical heat shrink. So take the new cable and then some electrical heat shrink. This is 1.5mm diameter, which will just go over the cable. And I've marked on the cable where I need it to slide up to. Then just take a lighter and just play it over just to heat shrink the heat shrink. And there you go, absolutely perfect. My epitaph will say, it's a shame he made such a waste of his life, but he wasn't half good at restoring cars. The new hood comes with a string in that seam there, so we can tie that string to our new wire and pull that through. So we laid the new hood loosely over the top, and now this is probably going to look like famous last words in an hour or two's time when we're still struggling with it, but I think this is going to be pretty easy because you've got plenty of references to work with. We know that this seam has to run along the edge of the frame all the way around. We know that this seam has to run down the falling pillar there. That corner of the hood has to sit in the corner at the bottom of the falling pillar seal carrier just there against the deck. And we know that this seam here has to run directly along that rail, and we've got those two flaps that we peen over and hold in with that plastic trim there. So at the back here, I think you've got enough references. We can't, touch wood, go too far wrong. The only thing that's going to be a bit difficult here looking at it is we seem to have quite a lot of slack in the fabric just in there. Do you see what I mean? I think that hard part is going to be getting enough tension into that side piece there. But let's see how we go. I think the first thing we're going to do is put the contact adhesive onto this flap and onto the under edge of the metal frame here, and we're going to contact adhesive, starting at the centre, we're going to contact adhesive the lower edge of the hood against the deck seal here, all the way around to this point here. The important thing is that we get started centrally, so fortunately the people that made the hood have put a little snip in there, so that's the centre line of the hood, and the original makers of the frame have also kindly put a centre line on the frame for us. So there's that hole drilled there, and you can probably see that someone's put a hand scribed a scratch into there, so that's the centre line of the frame. So we just need to get started in the middle by contact adhesive in this flap to the centre of the frame, and then we'll work out to the right and left. Is that? That is the corner, you see what I mean? That just feels like it's miles away to me. And then same idea on the left side. And I'm really happy with that. We've got a nice even line all the way along the deck seal there. It's well stuck down and it's a really neat job underneath. So the next thing is to come round and stick these flaps on for the falling pillar seals. Now they're supplied wider than we actually need, so that's good because it gives us plenty to tug on, and then we'll trim it down after we've stuck it on. The important bit to get right is this bit at the top here, because it's pulling on that top bit that puts all the tension into the side of the hood here and gets rid of this billowing gusset. So just inside here I've just temporarily clamped those flaps to the hood rail here, because that means we can keep this seam along the hood rail, so that gets that in roughly the right place while we're sticking the flaps for the falling pillar seal down. And then the worst bit of the whole job is refitting this falling pillar seal. Now you have to poke a couple of holes in the hood fabric to get the screws through for the seal carrier here. That part's easy enough. The bit that's just ball-achingly difficult is then pulling this flap around and sticking it to that plate at the bottom of the carrier there, and then you need to poke a hole in it and then bring the seal itself round and push your fir tree fastener through the seal, through the flap and then through the metal plate behind it. The reason that's so difficult, we tried to video this, but all you could see was my hands in the way doing this, and all you could hear was a load of swearing and blaspheming, because the reason it's so difficult is, like you see here, there's hardly any way of getting at it. The only way you can get to pull this flap around and stick it on and then get the fir tree fastener back in is if you do it like that. Fold the hood about 3/4 of the way away, then you can just about get at the bottom of it here, but it's a right old nuisance. Next thing is to reattach these flaps. So contact adhesive along the front edges of the rail and the back edges of the rail, then get hold of the flap, do the front one first, pull it so you pull in the rear window tight, stick it down, and then attach the rear flap. Then we're just going to trim these down with a pair of scissors, tuck that end in and reattach that plastic trim. And the next thing is we need to glue this flap to the front of the header rail. Something I didn't think about when I bought this hood, but which has turned out to be really useful, is buy your hoods from a company who makes them but also fits them, because of course they put reference lines on, chalk lines on for themselves to aid their fitters. So for instance, they put this arrow here showing us that that corner has to go right in that corner, and this dotted line is running right along where the header rail goes, so I know exactly where I need to fit this. So what we're going to do is contact adhesive on either side of the header rail. This flap again is supplied much bigger than it needs to be, so we're just going to use that to pull it round and get it nice and tight, and then we'll trim that off after we've got it stuck down. And then you have to really pull from one side to the other to get the hood to stretch to stick the flap down on the other side. Alright, got it. Tug. So you really have to pull. Stick that there. Good, that'll do. And then just peel back the front flap here and just get some contact adhesive onto the header rail and the equivalent on the hood itself, and get that glued down. And then just stick the hood to the header rail to our chalk marks. The trick is getting all your wrinkles and your air bubbles out. We're learning. Well, it took 3 attempts and lots of swearing, mostly from me, it has to be said, not so much from Helper Kate, but we finally got it done, so it's nice and even all over and ready to fit the header rail trim too. Now, a couple of points here that we've learned from that experience. The first one is that the company that sold me this hood would have fitted it for an extra £250 on the cost of the round trip to the southeast of England. And I now realise that would have been a bargain, because it would save me from this job. However, having fitted it myself, here's what we learned. If you get these side pieces too loose, if these side flaps are just too loose, all you can do is unstick it, pull this corner of the hood further forwards towards the front of the car. It's the only way of tensioning the sides. When you get the corners in a position that you're happy with, so the sides are nice and tight and the overall hood is nice and tight, then get some glue onto the header rail, between the header rail and the hood itself as soon as possible, because you're pulling so much tension in the corners there that the glue does tend to slip a bit here, so get that glue down as soon as you can after you're happy, but only after you're happy with the position of the hood at the corners. When you spread the glue onto the header rail here, spread it really thinly. Don't spread it like cream cheese, because if you do, you can see it sticking through the hood. It looks rubbish and it takes absolutely ages to remove it. If you do need to remove it, start again with a cloth and white spirit. Good luck! Punch yourself some holes for the header rail seal carrier. One of these tools makes that a lot easier, and then just peel and contact adhesive your flap down. Then refit the seal carrier using some 4mm stainless steel nuts. And at that point, now that the front is glued and screwed down so it can't go anywhere, let's just do a final check on the fit and make sure that it opens and closes properly before we glue the header rail seal back in. One thing I forgot to say actually, when you're fitting the front of the hood, make sure that the frame is square, because this one had got a bit twisted with rough handling over the years, and that makes it much harder to fit the hood and get it tensioned. If it is, so basically you're checking that the catches line up with the catches on the windscreen, that the gap along the front here is nice and even, and that the frame is level from right to left as well. The only way of getting it straight, if it is twisted, is just to manhandle it. It's just brute force and ignorance, and just get a bit rough with it and twist it back to the shape it should be, because there's no adjustment actually in any of the hinges or joints themselves. And I'm happy with that, so let's just do the last few bits and get the job finished. Back inside the car, trim the cable here to length and then do up the little screw that locks it. All this cable does actually is just ensures that this rail gets pulled fully forwards when you close the hood in order to tension the back screen. And then at the front, trim and glue this flap just to the seam on the inside of the hood there, and all that does is just makes a little cover to hide the front edge of that cable. So the only thing remaining is to refit the headrail seal into the seal carrier. So screw it back onto the frame at the sides right and left, and then lay about a 5mm thick bead of Sikaflex type sealant in the seal carrier, and then shove the seal into the seal carrier as best you can. I say as best you can because it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get it to fully sit in the seal carrier. Helper Kate described it as being like trying to shove an octopus up a whale's arsehole, which I thought is an almost poetically accurate description of what it's like. You'll see what she means. But get it in there as best as you can, and then the easy way of doing it is from there, just close the lid on it, just shut the hatch, and that will compress the rest of the seal into the seal carrier, and then just leave it to set for, it depends what sealant you're using, but typically if you're using Sikaflex it's 24 or preferably 48 hours. Leave it closed, and then stand back and admire your work. Well, it might be tipping it down outside, but we don't care because we have got one fantastic looking new hood that doesn't leak anymore. Well done, Helper Kate. As a token of my appreciation for all the help you gave me there.
That is not going on YouTube.